Hi besties, can we just have a moment of your time before we start the episode? Can we ask you to please
like, follow, subscribe.
Love ya!
Hi Orlene!
Hello.
Hey besties!
So there were many people in my classroom that felt a sense of belonging, felt that they were, part of that tribe, and their teacher was kind of like their role model within that tribe. And it was really bloody hard to escape that. Oh, am I allowed to say that?
Do it, baby.
Okay.
Do what you want. How do you think their behaviour was being presented in schools and why they got there?
You think about, all of the sense of what that behaviour means for that child, but also for us.
The behaviour isn't their identity.
Yeah.
The feeling isn't their identity.
No,
Just to make it really clear what we want in the classroom.
We want it in
So we'll
every
put the
classroom.
scissors away.
Yeah.
Hey besties, welcome to Season 2, Episode 3, and I'm so excited to take you behind the scenes of our live event. And in this interview, I am interviewing the amazing Orlene Badu. Let's go to the interview.
We are so excited to welcome Orlene Badu to the Behaviour Besties Podcast. Orlene is an ex-headteacher, an anti-racist consultant, and author of How to Build Your Anti-Racist Classroom. Orlene also started her career as a teaching assistant, which highlights her passion and experience with working in education. Orlene is also the collaborator behind Behaviour and Bias from Jen's book, Behaviour, the Lost Modules. We are going to learn more about the link between behaviour and racism. We'll also be learning how we can make a difference in the classroom. You may know that the most recent discussions have been around the book, The Colour Monster. Wave your flag if you've used this before. We'll be learning why this might be a little bit problematic in classrooms and how we can support our children as well. I'm really looking forward to this and really looking forward to learning from you both as well. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Hi
Hello.
Orlene! Hey besties! It's nice, isn't it?
Lovely.
I think often with educators on a mission, like you and I, my friend, there is a drive that is shaped by our own experiences. You're an amazing author, consultant. Tell us what got you here and what's firing you up to reach further.
Oh, big question.
I love it.
And I had a stock answer, and then I listened to the first presentation, which was amazing, by the way, and I've kind of changed my answer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I know I'm going rogue. I'm good at this. This is what you do when you're a teacher, right? You can go rogue. So I think my main motivation was my experience at school. I listened really carefully about when we were talking earlier about tribes and kind of children feeling like they have a sense of belonging and they're with their tribe. And in education, I was definitely made to feel like I was on the outside of that tribe. So there were many people in my classroom that felt a sense of belonging, felt that they were, part of that tribe, and their teacher was kind of like their role model within that tribe. And my teacher wasn't that for me. I definitely felt like an outsider. I was definitely made to feel like I was different. I was the only black girl in my classroom, and that experience was really challenging and really harmful. And I also knew I was outside of the tribe because my teacher had definitely sat in the staff room and had conversations about me with other staff. So actually, that sense of feeling outside of the tribe in my classroom was extended beyond my classroom, because whenever I kind of walked around with all staff, I was that child, and there was definitely a shared conversation about what that meant. And it was really bloody hard to escape that. Oh, am I allowed to say that?
You do it, baby.
Okay.
Do what you want.
Okay.
We love you.
I'm a teacher, and I swear, my God.
Keep it our secret.
But it was really hard to escape that. So there were many things that kind of contributed to me getting through the education system, surpassing people's expectations of me. I wasn't poorly behaved. So therefore, the other lens was, well, you must be average.
Right.
Yeah, Orlene's really average.
Yeah.
She's just about going to make it. She might, my parents were told on a number of occasions, she'll do okay. It's just to get her through school. And there's my careers teacher told me I should think about a service role as I move on in the next stage of my education. So that was the fire in my belly. And I think also as a parent with 3 beautiful children, seeing them go through those same challenges however many years later, I decided that I had to do more.
Love that. You said you weren't badly behaved.
No.
You look cutie.
I'm not sure my teacher would agree, but I said.
How was that am I right in saying that you felt othered?
Yeah.
How did that impact how you presented yourself?
Okay, that's really interesting. So I think in education, we're really used to recognising sort of extreme racism. Yeah, so we know what a racial slur sounds like. We know what, if somebody has really extreme views, we can spot that immediately. The problem that I had at school and that I'm trying to kind of face in the work that I do today is that often it's the embedded and hidden forms that make you feel othered. And your teacher won't always spot that immediately or initially.
Yeah.
So I remember experiencing things and thinking, I can't really report this because nobody's going to agree with me. No one's going to see it. I'm probably going to get told off for being a troublemaker, starting problems where there aren't any. Why am I always taking it back to race? Those were all sorts of things that I was fearful of. So actually what I began to do, and what I see many children do, and I do a lot of pupil voice at the moment, what they do is internalise. And they're having an experience that is not recognised, that somebody's not saying to them, I see what you're experiencing and I'm going to do everything that I can to change this experience for you. They begin to feel like their voice is only heard when they are cooperating or saying the right things, and when so actually I often say to staff, if a child says to you, I've experienced this and I think it's racist, or, that very scary word, just remember how much it's taken for them to say that, because they've learnt not to say it. And they've learnt not to say it because often they've had a negative response for articulating that feeling or that experience. And actually, I was really enjoying the meditation earlier when we were asked to kind of breathe in and hold it. I love yoga as well, so I love doing that. But actually that feeling of breathing in and then holding it, and as staff recognising, damn, I haven't exhaled. Let me exhale before I respond. Let me just calm, measure, check myself, exhale before I take the next step. And a lot of what children talk to me about is what happens in the moment when we're holding our breath. And we're quite fearful, and that can be a fearful state, it can be an anxious state, it can be a chaotic state for us, and actually taking that time to exhale before making that, taking that step, taking that time to review before taking that step can make absolutely the most difference to every child.
We have a concept in TGMC which is the 90-second pause, and it's the difference between a reaction and a response.
Yes.
And how impactful that is with our behaviour support and classroom management.
Absolutely.
Because it kind of allows you to just ground yourself and look at the situation in a more rational way rather than an emotive reaction.
Yes. But it also means so much to the child as well.
So much.
It says lots to that child when we take that pause. It says to them, you're thinking, you're listening. What I've said hasn't been dismissed or unheard. You're just taking the time to see me or hear me. So I think it's so important for all of us within that interaction.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's all right.
So you worked in a PRU.
I did.
You were the head teacher, right?
I was for a year. I did a secondment in a pupil referral unit.
Can you just, for people who don't know, can you explain what a PRU is?
This is So what I would say is that when you work in a PRU, I can't speak for all of them. I can only speak for the one that I worked in and the other ones that I worked with. My first impression of it was, oh my goodness, this is a school for black boys. That was my first impression. It was alarming. It still alarms me today. But a pupil referral unit is basically when a child has been permanently excluded from their school, they go into the care of the local authority and they go to a pupil referral unit, which is supposed to be a school that they go to that then reintegrates them back into mainstream. That's what it's meant to do. What often happens is children go into a PRU on the understanding that they will then be reintegrated, but actually what happens is they spend ridiculously long amounts of time there. It's very difficult. The longer that they're there, the more difficult it is to reintegrate. There are lots of children there that definitely shouldn't be there. They might have needed a specialist provision. They might have just needed another experience. They might have just needed another teacher. But actually they get stuck there, and we know about the school to prison pipeline, and that, you know, being in a PRU means that you're much more likely to be in a prison. The statistics are quite scary about that. It's really interesting that I think, don't quote me.
We will.
Okay.
Put it in the notes.
But, you know, up to 90% of prisoners have had some form of exclusion. At school, up to 90% of prisoners have a speech, language and communication need. And actually, if we'd spotted that in school, it's likely that they wouldn't have then been excluded from schools or gotten into the prison system. And that idea of, I think we talked about it, like, you know, that our perceptions can mean that sometimes we think it's just behaviour.
Yeah.
A child is difficult because it's just behaviour, and actually what we know from that data is that often there's a need that's not met, and if you're othered, it's very difficult to look beyond and see what that need might be, or is there another need that child has.
How do you think, like you said when you first started the PRU, you thought, oh my goodness, this is a school for black boys. How do you think their behaviour was being presented in schools and why they got there?
I mean, that's an interesting question, because I think there were so many young children there, and I mean, there were children there that were as young as 4. So there were so many young children there who, when we got their report, it often said it's a behavioural issue. And then, you know, they were very much judged on it's just their behaviour. Actually, within 6 weeks of being in the PRU, they got an assessment, and there was an undiagnosed need that hadn't been spotted or hadn't been seen for that young person. And I think that kind of idea of, you know, understanding why that is racism. So I think when we hear the racism words, we all kind of hold our breath and get quite scared. But actually, there are systems and processes in our schools that mean that children, we're making judgments about children that are based on our biases. They're based on our own perceptions. And if we don't challenge them, we'll continue making those decisions. So, you know, that idea of kind of taking the 90 seconds, you know, if we think about that in practice, how can I review? How can I sit back and think about what's happening for this child? What haven't I tried? What about other people's opinions of this child is impacting on my sense of who they are? How do I just go back and look again? You know, how do I just, and there's lots of things in my book that kind of ask you to just go back and look again, just to review and to rethink, and actually, are there questions that I need to ask myself about that experience? Because so many children end up in the pupil referral unit, and often it's just, you know, that, yeah, it's just behaviour. And it's never, you know, we know it's never just behaviour. They're communicating something. And I know there's lots of people out in education at the moment that are really trying to challenge that whole idea of it's just they're communicating something. They want us to believe that it's just behaviour. But actually, behaviour is not just negative. There's positive behaviours. Behaviour is a way of communicating. And until we think about, you know, all of the sense of what that behaviour means for that child, but also for ourselves, what are we exhibiting? Have we? I often I suggest to staff to kind of just do that body scan. In that 90 seconds. Just do a body scan. How am I feeling? What's this bringing up in me? Why am I reacting in a particular way? Why am I reacting in a particular way with this child? How do I think about that? Let me just process that before. And actually, if you can't do it in the moment, it's not to beat yourself up about the fact that you didn't do it in the moment, but actually, when I can, how do I review and sit down and think about this process? And I think that time for review is really important in terms of what our children's experiences are. And, you know, we're so busy, we're constantly moving, we've got so much to do. And so actually, sometimes we can just do things because it's quicker to get to an end result. But actually, really, how do I take that time just to review and to think about the experiences of this particular child? How can I change this dynamic?
I think as well, a really powerful shift is just thinking, would I react or would I follow the exact same steps if it was this child, any other child in that classroom, or if it was the first ever time they called out? Would I react in the same way? Because especially as primary teachers, and at this point in the year, behaviour's starting to feel a bit triggering because we've had it a few times. But I think it can be really helpful to just think, look, if this was the first time, I know, give myself that 90 seconds. What would I do? How would I get curious instead of going straight through the motions of punitive consequences?
That curiosity is really important. And, you know, asking ourselves those questions, do I react like this when child A behaves in a particular way, is a really important question, because actually often what we do is we have a narrative. We'll say things like, well, child A wouldn't have done this, or child A, and when I do people voice, people say all the time, it's not fair. That's the way they articulate the difference in how they've been treated to their peers. It's not fair. They might not be able to verbalise what that means, but they'll say a lot of, it's not fair, and understanding what that means, thinking about language, for example. So there are some children who will, and you can imagine who those children are for yourselves, but there are some children who will kind of withdraw themselves, not pay attention to our lessons, and will say things like, we're really worried. They may be experiencing, you know, they seem a bit dysregulated. I'm really concerned that they're not engaging. I'm going to take a kind of safeguarding route with this child. And there'll be another child who's not engaging, withdrawn, and will say things like they were disrespectful, they were arrogant, they were naughty, and we'll take a behaviour route for that child. And actually, how do we make sure that we're always thinking about the well-being of all of our children, even if we note that we feel something about, we're triggered by some of their responses.
And I think what's really key there is that the behaviour isn't their identity. The feeling isn't their identity. These are all, the feeling is something they're experiencing at that time. The behaviour is something they're communicating at that time. It's not who that child is. And going back to that first point of what you're saying of seeing that child for who they are and giving them that time.
Can I just say though as well, Jen, I think we're never going to get through all these questions, by the way, but based on
question 2, it's going to be great.
Based on what you said, it's that idea of we create narratives about children in the staff room. We create narratives of children. So one of the things that I encourage teachers to do and educators is when you get your new class, you can even do it now. It doesn't have to be at the start of the year, but you've got your class and there's this child that is challenging. One of the things to try and really drown out is the sound of other staff letting you know you've got that child. You've got that family. And we all know that conversation that happens. And we all know that kind of, let me warn you, you need to be prepared for this child.
Wave your flag, by the way. If this resonates.
And actually it has such an impact on us, and it has such an impact on that child. So what actually happens is that child never gets the chance to have that sense of belonging that we talked about in the tribe. You know, when they come to a new classroom, to a new teacher, they're never given, they can't escape that narrative of what we've said they are. So I really encourage you, like when you're talking about your children, when you start to think about transition next year, when people start to warn you about children that are coming, ask yourself, why is it important that they think you need to know that? Is it more about the year that they've had, and therefore they want to almost say it wasn't me, it was them? But B, how am I going to disrupt this? Because not only their child, but their family is always having that narrative, and therefore they can never escape it. And then therefore they can never, it's that self-fulfilling prophecy then, isn't it? If you've got a whole staff team that, and I talk about it in terms of some people are like, but actually if you're a child walking through your school day, and at every juncture, every adult thinks you're that child, it will change their response to you. You know, if you walk into the dinner hall and you're chatting with your friends, what are you doing in here? Because you're that child. If you're in PE and you don't hear the instruction first time, why aren't you not listening? Because you're that child. So everywhere you go, it's impossible to escape that. And I think one of the things that I'd really ask everyone today is to think about, how can I be that person for that child?
I love that. And I know I've said it before, but I want to share it again, because one of the most important strategies that I did, because sometimes when you're struggling with behaviour, you just can't get out of your head and you want to have that reflection. But again, when you've been with a class for so many months, it can be really tricky and it can be an echo chamber, like you're saying, with other adults. One of the best things I ever did with the trickiest class I had was to set up an iPad and just see what the experience was like for them coming into my classroom, and how it felt like, anything else that I missed, how I was responding to them. I honestly watched it for about 12 seconds and was like, okay, well, he didn't have a pen. And that was it. And I think that's just such a powerful thing we can do when we're feeling like we need support with reflecting. I'm going to move on. I'm going to switch gears, honey.
Okay, great, because I was about to start talking about that.
Another thing. Let's talk about early perceptions of colour. Okay, so recently I changed the balls of emotion, and that came from a conversation with one of my members who said, Jen, loving TGMC, but you've got the Colour Monster resources. Like, are you aware of how problematic this is? And I'll be honest, I was like, oh, to be honest, my bias is kind of like, okay, my reaction is, I don't know. Is it? So I reached out to you, and Little Seeds of Teachings also does anti-racist work. And you said, yes, it is problematic, which they were cut from TGMC, and we rebranded the Balls of Emotion. I'm just excited to hear from you the importance of this, because that is such a common book in classrooms universally, and it's so great to hear from you about why.
So that's really, I think it's amazing that your TGMC community are also impacting on the work that you do, and that kind of reciprocal approach. I love that. It's such a network. It's really interesting, because I think it is, I think it's problematic for a number of reasons. And I think often it's about the fact that we have a society that's been set up in a way that, you know, race is a social construct. It's not a real thing. If you look at our DNA, if you were to look at our cells, we now know under a microscope, you couldn't tell the race of a person by the cells that make up their body. You just couldn't tell. So actually there's more, you know, we're more similar than this social construct that's kind of depended on creating difference. It's depended on seeing race as a way of dehumanizing people, and therefore kind of the experiences that have been had. If you dehumanize the people, you can't see the challenges that they face. You can avoid seeing the challenges that they face. That's a really basic description. Please have a look at my book for a deeper description. But actually, you know, if race is a social construct, you have a society then you know, it was very much about kind of ensuring that in proximity to whiteness, that the lighter something was, it kind of was good, and the darker something was, it was bad or negative. And there's lots of things in our language that kind of speak to that. Which I won't necessarily go over today because we know all of them. But the idea of light is right, and the darker something is, the more sorrowful. You know, depression is often a dark colour. Anger is sort of tipping into that bad, negative. And The Colour Monster is a book that is for the early years. And we just have to think about the narratives that we are continually repeating with our children, even at their very youngest age. You know, and I think it's really important as well to recognise that if you've been taught not to see race, it can be hard to see the challenges with that. If you live with the consequences of racism, it's really easy to see the challenges of a book like The Colour Monster. You know, that idea of children feeling like the closer you get to darkness, the more negative, the more challenges, the more worries, it's not a happy space, it can have a real impact on children, on families, but also on us. And often without us realising. And that's another, the idea of hidden, embedded forms of racism. So actually, it's a children's book. You might think actually that's not going to have much impact on very much, but actually what it's doing is sharing those narratives for our children. I would love to think that, and I know that will be the case in here, that you will have children that are in your classes that are going to grow up and are going to challenge and are going to advocate and are going to be allies and are going to support and are going to challenge inequalities where they exist because of the education that they've had with you. But actually, if we can't see that in the books that we share, then actually we're still feeding those negative stereotypes. So the diet that your children have in your classrooms is going to be really important in that journey.
That was beautiful. We'll quote that.
Okay. You can quote that one. That was me.
There was an Instagram quote. I can't remember her name. Tiny Teacher, Little Travels, I think, but I'll put it in the notes.
Yeah.
And she was saying it was heard in a nursery in reference to the colour monster of, are you feeling a bit black today?
Yeah.
In terms of scared.
Yeah.
And if you can't see it from, I think for me that was like, whoa, in a nursery for our youngest children.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get things like, if there's any early years practitioners or teachers in here, wave your yellow flag. Great. So in the early years, you will see things like, you're hearing these stories of the colour monster, and then you've got children that won't play with the black dolls, for example. I'm not playing with that doll. They get left alone. Everyone fights for the whiter dolls, including the children of colour. Like, they're all fighting for those dolls because that's the dolls that we all want to have. It's there in our classrooms. It's there every day. I often work with schools where in the early years children have told a child, well, you can't play with us because you're not white, or you can't play with us because you don't share the same characteristics as all of us. That really puts a child on the outside of a tribe. That really puts a child, that others them and pushes them out. So actually everything that we feed our children with, everything that goes into who they are, if you think about your classroom as your tribe, you are pivotal in that. You set the tone about that sense of belonging. You set the tone about every child seeing themselves reflected and valued. And that could be in things such as the books that you choose, the curriculum that you deliver, the conversations you have, the way that you deal with bullying incidents. Seeing, I often talk to staff about, in our classrooms, we see children that might be isolated by their peers. And, back in the day when I was a child, my teacher saw that and walked straight past and didn't get involved, didn't think, actually, that's something that I need to tackle because the culture of my classroom, we need to make sure that everybody feels involved. So actually, for the children that were isolating me, that's fine. Because Miss walked, I nearly said her name there. Because Miss walked past. So that means, I think one of the things I really want us to hold on to today is whatever you walk past is what you accept. And that's really important for us. And I know that we've got 101 things to do, but every set of eyes in that classroom is watching us for, do we have to include or is it okay to exclude? And I think that's a really big, and that starts right from the early years. And every single book that you share, there's a narrative there that is speaking to what our classroom stands for. So it's really important that we hold ourselves to account in that respect. And also I work with schools where they get children to review their texts and to say, is this inclusive? Does everyone feel involved? And they go right throughout the school and do that. Yeah. And actually that's just a fabulous way of the children taking ownership of that.
That was actually what I was going to ask you, because we know that stories are so important, you and me, boo, for that connection in the classroom, because it activates the limbic system. So when you're having that story time, it's one of those times you're connecting as a class. So while we got is there any other books that you think everyone should be mindful of?
Oh my goodness, there are so many.
They want to get their scissors out.
There are so many. I couldn't even possibly. Oh, damn it.
Sorry, babe. Is there one that speaks out that you're like, ah?
There's one that's just come out by an author. He's an early years practitioner called Jamel Carley. He's just written his first picture book. I wish I could remember the title of it now, but it's by Jamal Carley, and you can definitely find it quite easily. And it's about a little boy who goes to school in the early year setting. He goes into nursery and he's really anxious and nervous about going there, and he is absolutely spellbounded when he sees the teacher that confronts him. And it's such a beautiful story, and actually is really important for our children. I think any book that speaks to seeing different cultures, but not it's really interesting because we've got lots of diverse books and they're not written by diverse authors, first of all, which is quite challenging. So thinking about the authors are as important as the characters in the text. But, you know, any book that I believe that every book and everything in your curriculum should speak to all of the children in your classroom. Everyone should see themselves in our classrooms in a positive light. Yeah, so we've got books where children see themselves in a situation of subjugation or repression, really negative narratives or darkness. But actually, where are the books and the texts that amplify them? And I would definitely say Jamal Carley's book is one to Google. And
one that we want, just
classroom.
to make it really clear, one we want in the classroom.
We want it in
so we'll
every
put the scissors
classroom.
away.
Yeah.
Get the shelf up. Good. We'll put some more in the notes.
Yeah. I can give you some more though to share in the notes.
Yeah, we will. Amazing. And I know I could talk to you forever and a day, but the curriculum, you've touched on it multiple times. Just to finish, I guess, on what to be mindful of in the curriculum, and might be a spanner, Black History Month.
Okay. Interesting question. This is a new one. She never told me this in the so
I'll just go with
me think on my feet. But I did say that I was a teacher, so I'll have to get on with it like you all do every day. I said before, I think our curriculum, when I do People Voice, lots of children say to me, sometimes, Miss, I don't even want to hear about my culture in the classroom, because when I hear about it, it's not positive. Yeah, so sometimes I don't even want to focus on our culture. I don't want, and not because, it's making sure that every child gets that diet. Every child needs it. And lots of people will say to me, well, actually, Orlene, you used to work in a diverse borough. So actually, I went to a government roundtable once where they said to me, we understand that you need this diverse curriculum in your school because it's so diverse. And I said, actually, the less diverse a school is, the more that curriculum is needed, because we're trying to create anti-racist leaders of the future. That's what we want for the children in our class. They're the next generation that will have the power, and we want them to be those anti-racist leaders that have seen all those stories, have had that curriculum, they know the positive contributions that they've all made to the UK, and that's really important as part of our work. So how are we sharing that and celebrating that in our curriculum? I did Hackney's diverse curriculum in 2020 during lockdown, when we were suddenly confronted, and there was a lot of kind of things that we had to learn as part of that process. We had to let go of a lot of stereotypes and perceptions that we had to be able to create this curriculum that valued every child and made sure that every child saw not only themselves but their peers in a positive light. That was really powerful, and also it was the fact that we could do it across all subjects. It doesn't just have to be English, it doesn't just have to be history, which is the common, everyone says, oh well, it's only history coordinator that needs to worry about that, when actually we could do it in maths, we could do it in science. It takes time, and I understand that we're time poor, so that can be really challenging sometimes, particularly if you're in a school that you feel like isn't supporting that work. That can be a really lonely place to try and diversify the curriculum, create anti-racist leaders of the future, when you've got a leader that's not really up for it, or doesn't see it as an imperative, or and that can be quite a hard space to advocate for that on your own. But the book kind of talks about things you can do in your own classroom. You don't have to wait for other people to get on board with you. You can start, and you can start a movement in your classroom. Absolutely. And every child that sees themselves reflected in the curriculum has the ability to thrive. We want thriving children, right? So how does our curriculum support that? How does our curriculum make sure that every child in my classroom thinks that feels positive, feels that they have a positive contribution, feels seen, feels valued, in a way that's important for everybody. So I would definitely recommend, I mean, the curriculum's not the panacea, it's not the only thing we have to do, but it's so important. Are there, you know, what are the messages we're sharing about different cultures in the visuals that we use? You know, what are the messages that we're sharing about genders? And, you know, there's so much for us to think about. And actually, the more we do it, the better we get at it. And it's just taking that time to step back and go, oh, what does that look like? Does everybody see themselves? Who hasn't seen themselves in my classroom? How can I think about that in what I'm doing? We are busy. There are, as I said, 1,000,001 things that you have to do. But actually, I think for most of us, we came into teaching for a moral imperative. We didn't come for the money. So there was a moral imperative. It was about doing the best that we could for every child.
Yeah.
And I believe that this is a way for us to do that. And doing it as a collective is really helpful as well.
Read, Write, Inc. have got, as part of their anti-racist practice, they've got this gorgeous phrase that is, your curriculum should be windows and mirrors.
Yes.
So you're either presenting something where children can directly see themselves reflected in it, or they're getting a perspective into someone else's experience.
Yes.
And I find that a really kind of helpful phrase to think of when I'm looking at my lesson.
Definitely.
Gone on for a while. Could go on forever.
We could.
Can you leave us with a mantra or a quote for our besties?
Oh my God. Okay, so I've got two.
Go on.
I've been thinking about this long and hard, and I was trying to think of a really cool, famous person, and I thought I'm gonna make one up.
Yes. Orlene Badu.
Yeah. Things that I always say. One of them is not mine at all, so I'll just say that now. I'll clarify that now. It's an old African proverb, and I think most of us have heard it. It takes a village. And just remembering, if we think about what was shared with us previously about tribes, for many, many children, you are imperative to that village. You are super important to that experience of them feeling like they are in a tribe. I cannot overestimate your power and ability to ensure that every child in your classroom is seen. I cannot impress upon you the importance of you in creating that village for that child. Their school and you are a huge part of their village. And I think when we all kind of really breathe out and think about that, it's really important that we remember that we are the village for every child. So, you know, are we that village that every child needs?
Yeah.
Are we the part of that village that every child needs? The other one that I would say is, keep building your anti-racist leaders of the future.
Beautiful. Where can we find you, my darling?
You can find me at number 15.
Everyone's going to be outside your door.
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram, Orlene Badu Consulting. I'm on Twitter, but don't bother to find me there. I can't bear it. I can't take it. I haven't got the time, energy, or moral compass to be able to cope with some of those people on there. And I've got a website, but actually Instagram's probably the best place to find me.
Name of your book?
How to Build Your Anti-Racist Classroom. And I hope it's just a really practical way for you to kind of feel supported in this journey.
Thank you so much, Orlene. That was amazing.
Thank you, everyone.
Hey besties, I am so excited to say that Behaviour Besties is sponsored by the amazing Sage Publications. And I am lucky enough to say that my book was published by Sage, Behaviour, The Lost Modules. They are the leading publication company for educational literature. And guess what? We have got a discount code for you. Yes, besties, check the notes to get your discount code and get your CPD on.